Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Ray Anderson, and I'm here today with Ed Lasak and Ron Burgess. We loosely define ourselves as the three consulting amigos. So having said that, today what we want to do is Ed got some great new information on the PPP that may be of value to some of you who have struggled with in the past. Maybe this is a way for you to access some funds, because once we segue to that, we're going to be talking about what's going to happen to the companies, the Main Street companies, the small ones, as we move from COVID and from all this pandemonium in the marketplace, and how we're going to move ahead and actually make our companies grow and make them survive as we move forward. So with that, welcome, guys. Good to see you all.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed, why don't you give us some insights from what you learned this morning about what passed and how that might be of help to some of these guys who are, wondering, can I take advantage of this?
Well, everybody probably has heard about the so-called PPP, which is it is the Paycheck Protection Program that a lot of businesses have applied for a loan. And this loan was a 24-month loan, and there was a possibility of forgiveness of the loan if the employment was kept up to a certain level. Well, it's passed the House and the Senate now, and it's on the president's desk to extend it. And the extensions are pretty favorable to businesses. The first part of the PPP program limited non-payroll deductions at 25%. Now they're talking about extending it to 40% for items such as rent and utilities and loan interest payments. And they're talking about extending the program from June 30th to the end of the year. And they're also talking about, rather just looking at payroll over 8 weeks, so looking at extending that to 24 weeks.
Cool.
And they're talking about making it a 5-year program rather than a 2-year program. So these are all advantages for being in this program. This, to me, is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And if there's a business out there that hasn't applied for it, give your banker a call or find someone who's willing to carry your paperwork up through the SBA, because you really need this. This is going to give you liquidity that you're going to need to continue your business. And we all know you have to have a strong balance sheet, and this will help strengthen your balance sheet and allow you to focus on your future cash flows, figuring out how you're going to do business in the new world.
Well, that's a neat segue to you, Ron. I think one of the things that we've talked about and we're concerned with is, even though this might be of some benefit to some companies, it may not be available in time for others. Tell me a little bit about what you see on Main Street based on your personal experience, even going to restaurants. What are your thoughts about what's going to happen, and do the companies really have the reserves?
Well, I think the answer is that there are few that have the reserves. Most of them have, maybe the wherewithal, not necessarily cash in the bank, the wherewithal to have 2-3 months maybe reserves. But it sounds like the dynamics are being changed here a little bit from what Ed had to say. So the original argument was, we're going to from the government, from Trump, we're going to provide your employees income so that you don't lose them. You can keep them on the payroll, and therefore you'd be able to just go ahead and spend money, and things would be sort of the same for them. However, I think in reality, what happened is that the PPP didn't get rolled out fast enough, and small business people realized they were in very serious trouble. And as a result, they had to, they simply had to let them go. And so they were already on furlough or fired. So Ray, your picture's gone away if you didn't know that. So as a result, by the time the money rolls in, these folks have already gone, and then at the same time, they've been given this extra $600 a week. And so you've got a huge number of restaurant employees and retail Main Street retailers who are actually making more money at home than they were when they were working. So they didn't really want to come back. I've heard several business owners say, siding with the employees, well, Sally was making so much more money than I could afford to pay her. I didn't want to mess that up, and so I didn't invite her to come back. And so when that runs out, then she'll have a job. And I'll go, well, the problem is that the PPP had to be used up in 8 weeks, I think, wasn't it, Ed? And so now the dynamic changes quite a lot, and there will be a difference. But back to your original question, I don't think the average business has enough cash reserves to keep their employees hired and not have the revenue to be able to come in. And I would say that the average, and Ed, you can weigh in on this, the average is probably got 3 to 5, 6 weeks worth of cash because they're balancing their accounts payable and their accounts receivable. And if they feel like they're in balance and the money's going to come in about when it needs to go out, they may use the rest of that cash for capital investment, savings, perhaps personal savings or personal.
Right.
So no, businesses are not designed to have 3, 4, 5, 6 months of cash.
Yes.
I shouldn't say they're not designed by their owners to have that much. It's not saying that they shouldn't have that much. So the number would be very small indeed.
Yeah, and then can you pick that up again, Ed? Because I think the point, if we can, is that there's this battle right now between bringing in people and, for the kind-hearted business owners to say, look, I'm going to let them stay on unemployment because they can make more. Is Congress thinking about adding additional pay to current workforce to kind of help move this forward?
I think they're giving businesses an opportunity to bring back their employees over a little bit longer period of time. Yeah. Because as we all know, when you start your restaurant back up with all the new restrictions, it's really going to be hard for you to employ the same number of employees that you employed, say, on February 15th. So this will allow you a ramp up time, which I think is a great way of making this program more advantageous to a business owner. And they have more time to bring their business up and hire their employees. And after this period of time, they get their employment up to what it was in February 15th. There is no more loan; it's forgiven.
Right.
And, to me, that's a big advantage, and I think a lot of businesses are going to take advantage of that. And I think these enhancements, believe it or not, coming from our government, is really going to make things a lot more effective.
Well, if I understood you correctly, did I hear you to say that, if they get this money, it might be wiser for them to give it to their employees as payroll so they can get back up to those numbers? In other words, they could offset that $600 a month by giving their employees more money to be able to make sure that they come in to get their loan forgiven. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, but the goal here is not to get your loan forgiven. The goal here is to reinstitute your business. And so therefore you can't foolishly start spending money without seeing any type of results.
Right.
Yeah, so you gotta ramp up your revenue over this period of time. And as you ramp up your revenue, you'll be adding more employees, and it'll allow you to make the metrics for a lot of that loan to be forgiven.
Well, I think that goes back to Ron again, because basically, they have to get their employee levels up, which means they have to get their business going again. And what we've observed is that that's going to be very unlikely, because even if they could open up their restaurant, that Main Street restaurant, they're only going to be at 50% capacity at most. Is that correct, Ron?
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, where I live, apparently 25% is the max at this moment, and maybe it'll go up a little bit soon. That's according to one of the restaurants that we frequent and we're able to go back to a couple of days ago. I was shocked that they were told 25%, because there's really no way that they can make any money at that small volume and have the same number of employees. They didn't have the same number of employees. And so had they been on the PPP program, which they are, they would have depleted all their money, or in a couple of weeks at the most. And so that would be over. Had they brought all of their employees back at the same time, they would have depleted all of that money, except now they'd have to let them go again, because
right.
they don't have the revenue at 25%, even 50%. They don't have the revenue to be able to maintain all of those people. And then there are these other little side things that go on. That is that they have to have more bus people than they did, because you can't a waitress cannot pick up, in our county, a waitress cannot pick up plates once a customer has touched them. So all the silver and all the glasses and all the plates have to be picked up by a bus person. Right. And now the person who busses the table is not allowed to serve. So it used to be that they traded back and forth, and if you need lots of water, it's like, well, whoever was there would get it for you right away.
Sure.
Now they've got this new division of labor, which is increasing their costs per meal. So, and I'm sure there are other little double whammies like that have increased their costs as well.
Well, let's go back to the, part of what we talked about the other day, and I think it's really significant here, is, change always forces innovation, and there are people who either go with the change and innovate or are gone. And, you made this point the other day. It seems to me that you only have 25% capacity. Every person that comes in ought to take home a second meal at least, or tell you who can we deliver a meal to, so, what are you going to recommend to grow the revenue, and how are you going to innovate in this marketplace today that's so fragile?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty big question, really, when you think about all the types of innovation. On a personal note, what I have personally been doing is that every time I get a takeout meal, I buy $100 gift certificate for a future date. And so that gives them a little unexpected revenue. You spend 20 or 30 bucks on a meal, and they get 120 or 30 bucks. And so now I'm going to be able to get that back if they stay in business. So it's be no skin off of my nose, but a little bit of a cash flow issue there. But basically, they're like little micro loans. And so I just try to do that for all the restaurants that I really like, that I would like to stay in business. Now, by myself, that's not going to make any bit of difference. But if we all did that, it'd make a huge amount of difference. Just like if you bought another meal to take home or something like that. But I think on the innovation side, that goes from how can we make small incremental changes now to really big, wild things like how are we going to develop a whole new stream of business, say, in the delivery business. Mm-hmm. These small restaurateurs are doing incredible innovation, trying to follow the new rules, it seems to me. Now, that's based on a small sample. We've been eating takeout for weeks, but we've only been to 2 sit-down restaurants since they've been open the last week. And we're trying to do that more, actually. We're decidedly, going out, trying to find a restaurant and go in and sit down, in as much as we feel being in a high risk group that we're reasonably safe. So they're doing a lot of interesting little innovations. Some of them are good and some of them are not so good. I think that in one case, we were having a hard time just getting a cup of coffee because they didn't know who should be, probably they didn't understand who should serve it and who didn't.
Right.
Yeah. Our expectation was any one of the people servers could give us coffee. It wasn't until the next night when we went to the other sit-down, little nicer restaurant that they explained the rules.
Yeah, right.
So there's a case where they might, you know, do a little better job of communication and be sure and explain to everybody, now, I'm a bus person. I can't bring you coffee.
Right, right. No,
You
so
know,
that's an innovation in which they can communicate more effectively with their customer. You know,
exactly.
and Ed, for this, you know, one of the things that Ron mentioned, and because I'm not familiar with this, and this, bear with me, you know, this idea of gifting them $100, how can a company set up a process for that to kind of make sure you get an access to a meal if they've never done that?
Well, that gets into ingenuity and innovation. They have to figure out a way, a cost-effective way of doing that, and keep track of the records accordingly. According to accounting rules, they really aren't supposed to recognize that revenue until Ron goes back and enjoys another meal.
Right.
But we got two things here. We got accrual accounting and we got cash accounting.
Right,
Now cash accounting is king. So Ron making those contributions them on the cash flow side really makes a difference.
right,
But you got to be open to new ways of doing business. You got to be able to articulate to your customer base that these kind of programs could be helpful for you and your business in surviving this situation, and so that they have a restaurant to continue going to in the future. It comes down to communication. And I think most customers are willing to do those little things to help out if they know and they understand the reason for it.
well,
So I think that's a nice little creative way of bringing in some cash flow for a restaurant.
Yeah.
I think, let me be a small restaurateur, you know. I've never done this before in my life. Have no idea how to gift card. You know, what I'm asking us to kind of think about, is there a way and we can give them a step-by-step how-to, or refer them to somebody who could help them set up some kind of a gifting thing? Is there an addition on the software that they already use that could be easily opened up for that?
Well, being an old retailer, you know, way before all of this technology started, there's a pretty old-fashioned way to do that, and it's just called a piece of paper. And so, you know, you just have a little certificate. It's worth X number of dollars, and you hand it to the person who buys it, and they bring it back in as specie, really, and that's cash to them, and they honor it. And then if they don't use the whole thing, they give them their change back as another gift certificate, and it's that simple.
Cool. Yeah.
Now,
And
but
that, Ron, that's
you're,
what I was asking, is that,
yeah.
you know, many times these people are so preoccupied, you know, with trying to do day to day. Any suggestion like you just gave is one way for them to say, oh, that's simple. You know, you could write it right on the receipt. There's a balance due of X number of dollars.
See,
And then bring in this receipt and we'll give you so much credit on your next meal.
Yeah, see, most of those folks, you know, have always had that down, because people ask for gift certificates all the time. It's just that they, you know, what they haven't been innovative about is to put a little placard there on next to the pickup and say, you know, we've got gift certificates and we're going to discount them. For $95, you're going to get $100 worth of food,
Right.
or whatever they feel
Yeah,
comfortable.
sure.
You know, but I don't see that. I don't see them thinking through, like, how are we going to get people to give us more revenue for some sort of value? Well, today, I mean, the value that you're giving is they like your food, they want to come back in the future, and they want you to stay in business.
Right,
In,
right.
in addition to that, if they thought that they could multiply their own money by 5% or 10%, now there's another reason for them to see the value there. And there's
Right, right.
value to the restaurants too, because there are many restaurants that are going to make mistakes the first time out. And if they make a mistake, they want you to come back and give them another chance to show you that they have finally trained their people correctly, that their, you know,
Right.
their old cook is back in the saddle,
Right, right,
and
right.
all that. So that's just one way. I think you're sort of thinking a little bit more technically. Well, how could we do that bigger and better? I think you're right. I mean, somebody could have come up with an online gifting program. There are several programs that where you can make reservations
Mhm.
for, and so why aren't they doing that? Square, which
Mhm.
has more than just a credit card processing business, they have all kinds of services for retailers who they may have that,
Right.
but still you're not seeing restaurateurs, small retailers getting up the gumption to say, by the way, it would be very helpful to us if you are interested in doing continuing business here, for you to buy gift certificates for yourself, for members of your family, to be used in 2 weeks, to be used in.
And I think, going to your point, what I like about what you just said, it's one thing to throw out an idea to somebody, but it's really helpful to say, look, here's how you do that. And I think the two things that I heard from you, Ron, which were helpful, is that they could post this on the door, or they could make a little hand printed. It doesn't have to be fancy, pardon my mess, but here's how you could help us.
Sure.
Because when you're sitting there waiting for food, if you can read this stuff, you'll read it. And so I think in those two things, you gave them some valuable insights without having to go to the expense of changing their technology. It's
Right.
a paper
Right.
change that can be made very quickly.
And you put
And
that
from
on
your
your
perspective,
website.
where you come from on the finance side, tell us a little bit, what would this mean for their revenue, and how could they move it forward more quickly?
Well, like I said, cash is king. So anything you can do to raise your cash is a good thing for your business, especially now. So that's one idea that Ron came up with. There's probably 100 other ideas out there, that best practices of various restaurants throughout the country. And another one would be, if instead of having one drink, if they had two drinks, obviously that would add a lot to the bill also.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. And the bottom line, though, is you have to have it as part of your menu. You have to ask for it. You have to let people know that you have it. And they have to understand how important it is for your continued success. Because I think most Americans want to support their establishments, and they want the small business to survive. And they enjoy going to these venues for their eating experience. So it makes a lot of sense. But if you don't ask, if you don't create new programs, if you're just focusing on the way you did business as you did a year ago, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities.
Right.
Ron indicated earlier, or was it you, Ray, that a lot of these businesses weren't profitable or were moderately profitable before this hit. Now there is no cushion on their P&L. It's all red.
Right.
So they have to figure out new ways of bringing in revenue. And they have to think outside the box. They got to talk to people. They got to bring people in for ideas. And then they have to have the courage to make changes and deviate from the past. And that's not always in their DNA to do so. So I think consultants provide a great role here in helping them to become more profitable, and that's what it's all about.
Well, I think, given that I know that there are probably people listening, I know I did a workshop last night and there were a couple of questions that came up. And my question to you guys is that as I'm listening to this, and I'm a small business owner and I'm hearing these good ideas, and I'm thinking I have very little cash as it is, what am I going to do? Even if I wanted these guys, how would I get them involved? Because I would struggle to be able to pay for them. How do we help these small businesses move forward in such a way that obviously we're helping them, but also we need, like them, to help ourselves?
Well, there's one big difference. If they call their local CPA or their attorney, soon as they pick up the phone, they're on the clock and they're going to get a bill.
Right.
Um, with consultants, for the most part, consultants need some time to go in and understand the business and understand the opportunities, and usually write a report saying, well, we think we can do this for you. And you can put a quantity of how that's going to impact your bottom line. And for the most part, it's like 10 15 or 20% of the improvements that are brought in, I don't see how you can lose on that. It's basically, if there are no improvements, there's no expense. But if you go the traditional route, trust me, you'll be getting bills in the mail, and then you'll stop asking questions, and that's what always happens in small business. My attorney's going to charge me $400 an hour, so I'm not going to call him.
Right.
Guess what? You're going to lose out on a lot of opportunities that you're not even aware of.
Well, this begs a question. I'd like Ron to respond to this, because basically I think, what this new economy is requiring is that everybody give a little bit. And to your point, Ed, that I think in order to make this work, and I think what we're kind of alluding to, when Ron says, hey, I like this restaurant and I want to see them survive, and I'm going to give them $100 to make that happen. And I guess the question that this is begging kind of is that, are the CPAs and the bankers, the landlords, going to step up and say, it's in my best interest to make you survive, because without you, I can't do business either. Ron, give us some thoughts on that.
Well, I think there are people exactly like that. I think that's what we're doing. If everybody goes out of business, there won't be anybody who wants to buy consulting services. And so, I'm hopeful that they can come up with ideas that don't cost them money so they can stay in business, so they'll be there a little bit later. And I think that's the same with banks. Banks want to have businesses as clients. They have to have businesses as clients. They have empathy for small business. Some of them are structured so that they can't deal with small companies as well as maybe bigger ones. That's why community banks might be a better choice for them. I think the same thing, if you have a relationship with the CPA and you need some ideas about what to do, the CPA is working for you, hoping to keep you in business, because they very rarely take cash. And if you don't have the money to pay them, they're not going to get paid. So they're going to be there to help out. And there are also tons of things that can be done that, ideas come from a lot of places. Most ideas come from the internet today.
Right.
People are watching us on the internet. There are many other kinds of programs that are sort of in the category of customer loyalty programs, which is a small piece of marketing. And customer loyalty programs would give credit to the folks for the number of meals or the cups of coffee that they buy and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those are simple to do. You go in and get a cup of coffee and they punch your card, and when you get 10 of them, they give you a free coffee. So you've got a 10% discount. Meanwhile, you're carrying your card around in your wallet all the time in order to do what? To have a very small savings of 10%. So there are more sophisticated ways to do customer loyalty programs. Many of us are airline mile members, and that's a sophisticated way to do it. But there are ideas out there, and there are places to get ideas. I think I would sort of put the emphasis on do some of them, as opposed to, certainly don't wait around hoping that somebody walks in the door and gives you an idea that you can do, but be proactive. Most good small business people are already proactive. They're independent. They are sort of the heart and soul of our country, and they know how to go out and roll their sleeves up and get the tough work done that they have to do. They tend to forget about thinking about new ideas. And so I hope we're reminding them here that things are not ever going to be the same, and you have to think differently in order to be able to adjust to what those changes are. We don't, the three of us are going to be correct on a few things that change, and we're going to be wrong on a few things that come along that we never even anticipated. But small business people have to be very mobile in that sense, and they've got to really look hard and spend their evenings when they're not doing the heavy lifting. They need to spend their evenings looking for ideas online and thinking about how they're going to be able to attract more business, how they're going to be able to keep customers coming in more often. one thing people forget about, and Ed would jump on this, and that is, how do you get your new customers to spend more money with you? Well,
Yeah.
you get them to buy 2 drinks. That's one way. Well, get them on a frequency program so they come back more often. If they
Yep.
just came, if they visit a good customer, once every 2 weeks, just getting them to come back, one more time every month is a 50% increase.
Yes.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I think that people have to say to their customers, we really thank you, and we need your business. We don't like it or appreciate it. We need it. Be honest. We need your business to stay in business. We hope we'll see you soon.
Yes. Well, those are really valuable insights. And my hope is that as people listen to this, they understand, as Ed pointed out, the first thing you got to do is you got to ask. Now, here's the other side of that. We need a vendor loyalty committee as well. Somebody that helps them say, go to their CPA and ask, go to their landlord and ask, go to their insurance broker and ask, hey, I need your help to survive. I need your help. What are you going to do for me to make sure that I'm in business? Because if I go out of business, ultimately you go out of business. So let's talk about that side.
Well, that's a great question. You hit it right on the nose, and it was something I was thinking about as Ron was speaking. And this is something every business owner should do tomorrow. You should make a list of your vendors, and you should make a call to each one and ask what they can do for you to help you survive this situation. So if you call your CPA and your attorney and they won't take your call, or when you get them on the phone, you talk to them for 2 minutes and they charge you for 15, this is a great opportunity to look for another service provider across the board. When things are good, we kind of accept poor performance from our service providers because we really don't need to put any pressure on it because we're doing okay. But with this game-changing event, it's different. It's survival. You got to look at every dollar going out and how you can get more value for each dollar you're spending to your vendors. So this is a great opportunity to make the changes you've talked about privately or in your mind about certain service providers not being able to meet the mark and service you properly. Why wait? There's a lot of people out there would love your business and would give you the respect and the due care that you need for your business to survive. It's not charging by the hour. I think that motto is broken for the most part. I think it has to do with charging for performance. And as a business does better, it makes more sense to spend some money on a consultant to help you realize that benefit.
Well, and I think the point you made, and I really appreciate this, for years, the challenge that I've seen in work environments is we pay people for hours, which are activities. And activities have nothing to do with the business results, which is what keeps the business going. And so what I heard you say earlier is that, if in terms of reimbursement, it makes a lot more sense for us to demand our vendors to perform than to simply take a fee for activities performed. So I think we've opened the door for them to say, look, tie this to some increase in profitability, tie it to some increase in revenue, et cetera. And if we get an increase, you get a percentage. Is that fair? And I know, Ron, you've had some question about that, but I think this is a new world. This is a new marketplace. And I think it requires that we all rethink, our models and our compensation and how we help one another.
Well, I'll kind of take a little bit of the counterpoint there, because while I completely believe in performance, and I think that should start with how you pay employees, and it's a little tough to pay regular vendors that way because you're paying per unit usually if you're buying merchandise or raw materials. So, and I think you're really talking about business services professionals. But
right.
There's another piece to that, and that is that you have to be able to have the entire project under your belt or in your hands in order to be able to charge for performance. The vast majority of projects that I've worked on in 32 years of being a consultant to small business have required several people to have their fingers on it, including internal client people, maybe the owner. I might even have an outside vendor. Sometimes it's selected by them. And so you don't have control of whether or not a project is going to be completed. And therefore, it's very difficult to get paid for something you can't measure or you have no responsibility for. So then you end up having a conversation about, well, you didn't really do that. So-and-so was responsible for that, or, well, it failed. And then, but yeah, you, the owner, never executed it. You didn't do your part. Well, now all you have is an adversarial relationship. You haven't helped anybody. And so I have continued to charge by the time, always helping people to understand what the performance was and to illustrate that the performance was worth a whole lot more money to them than my fee. I've done this for a long time, had, relationships averaging 13 years, and I found that to work really well. The other side of that, from a professional consulting perspective, is when you finish a project and they pay you for it, on performance or otherwise, that's a good reason for them to say goodbye.
Right.
That's a great opportunity to say, thank you very much, Ray. You did a great job. We're going to try somebody else on the next one. I don't want anybody doing that to me. I didn't. I'm not doing that. I'm retired. But I didn't want anybody saying, I think we're going to try somebody else because this is a natural stopping point. No, I always want a project and another project and another project lined up, because that's the way business works.
Well, no, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm going to give you a counterpoint to say that works out real well for Ron Burgess. Does it always work out well for the company? That's another question. And I think part of our conversation here and the really importance of this is that as we're looking at asking questions, as we're looking at different ways of doing things, the innovations are going to come from how people are compensated. That's one of the things that's going to occur. Just as Amazon started with selling books and everybody says, they're never going to make any money at this, somebody is going to go out there and innovate a way to be compensated that they can measure and they can control, that's going to change the marketplace for business services. And so the question we're asking here at this point is that, do we facilitate that? And what do we do? Because our interest is not in our own services, it's in the survival of the heart and soul of America, which is the small business.
Yeah, my perspective on
let me answer his direct question, and then I'll throw it back to you if you don't mind. The answer is the client always comes out ahead. It's never that the consultant gets an upper hand on them, for two reasons. One is that because you have no contract, they can fire you at any moment, number one. Number two, there's always an outstanding bill. They can choose not to pay it.
Right.
Therefore, the client has never come out on the short end, as far as I can think, any time in 32 years. So that's the answer to that.
Cool. Ed.
Yeah, my experience has been a little bit differently. I think a lot of times in the past, consultants are brought in on specific projects. I think a consultant can add the most value when they look at the total business, the top line, the bottom line. And I think a business owner would be pretty impressed with the amount of opportunities that can be identified for improving their business. It's not one or two. It's usually several, and then you have to prioritize what you think has the biggest impact on your bottom line. And what I have always found, once you give that report and establish a relationship, it's hard to leave a company.
Right.
They really appreciate what you do. You are part of their governance. You are part of their ownership process where they're getting an independent observation from the outside. So I kind of like the retainer type of thing where you say, okay, you want me one day a month or a
Mhm.
quarter or whatever. You go in and you update the progress to the plan and identify more opportunities. But as Ron said earlier, he's right. I mean, consultants can only advise, and it's got to be the owners that take the initiative to actually implement some of these recommendations that we think make sense.
Yeah, and all I was saying is that, everybody today in America is taking an enormous unintended risk. And part of the job that we have moving forward, and, Ron, by saying, I'm going to give this restaurant $100 to help mitigate some of their risk. And part of what we're doing as we start getting on the vendor side, and it's funny, one of my very successful clients told me, he said, the customers aren't as important to me as my suppliers and my vendors. He said, if I know they're intact and I know I can count on them for my product, I can always answer my customers. And I thought that was kind of a fascinating look. That's why I brought this up. Is there ways we can leverage, this current situation to help everybody, because we're all in this together. And the more we figure out how we can make their life easier and mitigate some of their risk, the more likely it mitigates my risk and other people's risk. So that's kind of what I was alluding to as we moved in towards the end of this particular conversation. But I think the value of what we've done is we've exposed not only the Main Street business, but service providers with some options and some innovative ways in which they can now go out and get more business. Because to your point, Ed, people are going to be looking now, when they can reduce their cost by 10% by going from vendor A to vendor B, some of them will have to do it just to survive.
That's correct, Ray.
So,
Those will be the tough decisions that have to be made. And a lot of times you're doing business with somebody for a long period of time, but if they're not meeting the mark, you got to be objective about it. You got to sever the relationship and find someone who's going to give you what you need.
Well, I would just add that monitoring vendors and monitoring employees and even customers is in my opinion, it's a process that needs to be regimented and clear and well thought through. Not very many small businesses are able to really do this. They could if they wanted to. It's not difficult, but I really see that as more of a performance index. And this is what you were talking about, Ray, as well. How can we look at different ways of compensation? Well, I think the only way you can do that is by taking a good solid look at how are we going to measure performance. You have to look at on-time deliveries. What's your percentage
right,
of on-time deliveries? How many chargebacks have we had to process for you? How many of those chargebacks did we think were really unfair? We may have actually taken the charge back, but we thought that was an unfair one. Or or in reverse, how many times have you charged us back? And,
right.
and so that you have to kind of really evaluate that. So you need to do the same thing with customers. What's your gross profit margin for each customer? What's the frequency of their purchase? What's the depth and breadth of your product mix that they actually buy? Do they just buy one category? Do they buy 20% across 5 of your 7 categories? So there are several kinds of I think instruments that can be put into place, just as you should be fair to employees. It's not right just to fire somebody because they're doing a bad job. They need to understand that they have misstepped on day 4 and on day 7, and then you have a warning. They need an opportunity. This is just humanity. They need an opportunity to correct their behaviors or correct their actions or to increase their ability to complete the job with the right quality levels. Those are the kinds of things that they need to be able to perform better. And so it's a gradual process to let a vendor go. just as it should be for employees and even customers. I've been in the unfortunate position to have to let customers go.
Mhm.
Um, Fortunately, I've been in the enviable position to be able to allow and let them go too. And the way that that happens is by having, conversations and say, well, now here's what happened. This is, we didn't get the cooperation that was required for us to hit our performance standards. We have standards. We don't like to miss those standards. We have a reputation to keep. We want to please you, et cetera. And at some point you have to say, finally say, we can't please you. You're going to probably find somebody else can do a better job for you than we can, for
Right.
whatever reasons. But of course, they know exactly what those reasons are because you laid them out over time.
No, and that all makes sense. And I think what we're opening the door to here is this idea that your vendors are a real opportunity to kind of control costs. Because as Ed said, I think too frequently we develop these relationships with insurance, bankers, et cetera, that to your point are relational, right? We like these people. They've served us for a long time. And truthfully, most of them make a lot of money. So it's like if the better they are at building relationships, the more likely clients will stick with them because they're good, to your point, Ron, of serving their customer.
Mm-hmm.
But then at some point, when the risks are really, really enormous as they are today, you have to begin to look at these and say, if I can save 10% here, as opposed to this relationship, what will this mean to me in the long haul if all other things are equal? And so part of what you and I and Ed are talking about here is how do we help these small businesses that are inundated in just survival to be able to look at those things, their legal expenses, their insurance expenses, their banking expenses, their leasing or rental or other expenses to see if they can't save 10%, because as we were talking about, that savings could literally mean the difference between making it or not making it.
Well, it's not just about money, though. Right now, getting the supply of the proper amount of ketchup in some restaurants is a major deal.
Sure.
You're going to go get a hamburger and some fries, and they don't have any ketchup. Well, you better have a vendor that's willing to do that to make sure you get your allotted supply of ketchup.
Right.
So I rarely, I have beat up vendors in our company that serve our company for price, but I'm much more concerned about quality. I really need quality and performance more than I need price. So we tend to beat our vendors up on price for our clients because they need to have the price. And so we still do printing of about 250,000 pieces every single year. And it's important that the prices are very fair.
Right.
But it's imperative that they never, ever miss a deadline. And we will punish those people if they do. And in one particular case, we have hit a monthly newsletter deadline for 29 years in a row and never missed it once until about 3 months ago, before this whole COVID thing came apart. That was a call directly to the president of the company to say that we have relied on them and they've been successful for 29 years every month in delivering the goods. And you missed it. And you need to understand that one more time and you will miss the entire 250,000 job.
Well, and see, and all I'm saying, Ron, and we're in accord on this, is that this is an investigation that has to be done. And part of what we're trying to do, as I understand this, is help people understand a simple mechanism for doing that. You identified a couple of things, and I think Ed had too, but like the placard at a restaurant. Hey, we need each other. Here's what we're doing, and here's how you can help us. Here's what has to be done. So you inform the customer, you keep them abreast of it, you ask for things. what I'm saying on the other hand is we have to do the same thing with those vendors who have been helping us. We've had a long-term relationship. You've done a great job. But to your point, you did it for 29 years. You made a mistake. You make one more, and we'll have to have a serious conversation about using
Oh,
somebody else.
that was the serious conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So the point is there are consequences to missing quality. And all I was saying is all things being equal, we are in a position now that if people cannot provide a level of service that, to your point, doesn't exceed the cost of the product or service, then we have to reevaluate that. And we're helping them make that decision because, again, for many of the organizations that are going to survive, it's because they were smart enough to get through this. We're trying to help them make some other simple decisions to mitigate even further risk. And that's what I think we're trying to accomplish here. At least that's my hope.
The one thing in business that's constant, and that is communication. So the bottom line is if you are providing a service to somebody and you're not meeting the mark, you need to know about it.
Mhm.
You want to know about it because you want the opportunity to fix it. But there's so many times where people are surprised. They get a termination notice in the mail and they say, well, no one ever told me we had a problem.
Right.
That's because you're not communicating with your
Right.
customer.
Right.
Or whatever. So you have to know, and it is based on performance.
Right.
Performance drives profits, and price is part of it, but it's not the only indicator. If you came up with an idea that actually saved you money and it cost you more, you do it tomorrow. So, it's a balancing act, but the bottom line is you got to look at it.
Right.
If you look at it, if you're too busy looking at other things, you're going to miss out on an opportunity.
Well, and I think, to kind of wrap this up and to reinforce what Ron said, what Ron has always been good at is looking at the customer's interests, and that's what keeps him there. And all we've done is we've shifted from the direct customer to the next customer up the line, which is, your vendors. You have to anticipate that each one of the vendors you have, the banker, the insurance broker, the CPA, the attorney, have thought about what Ron's saying. How can I better serve my customer, particularly in this need? And so the demand on this is us as a customer, whether it's me sitting in the restaurant or me going with a certain CPA, I have choices. And if you can't serve me appropriately, I will make those choices, just as you guys had to with this printing guy who was on time 29 years in a row. So all we're doing is saying it is a new world out there. And everybody is having to assess what and who they're working with simply to survive. This is no longer a luxury. This is about, I'm on a oarboat, or I'm trying to survive. I got a life preserver. This is a life preserver for me. So this is where I think we've done some value for anybody who might be listening, to help them examine everything in their business and try to find people on the outside who can better serve them. So unless there's anything else, we've been at this about an hour and we're going to come again next week. Is there anything that you guys think we should be thinking about for next week, or shall we just watch and see what happens and kind of go as we have been by just trying to identify ways in which we can continue to help these small businesses survive?
Well, one of the big things that a good consultant provides is the expertise that don't exist in the company. And my experience with Ron has been phenomenal because I've worked with a lot of marketing people over the years. They claim to do this, they claim to do that, but in reality, a lot of times the metrics weren't being met. And to be able to have a small business and have access on a part-time basis with a true expert, and I'm using Ron as an example here as a marketing company.
Well, thank you.
That is worth so much.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of times people put up with their lack of progress and experience, and success with some marketing companies aren't doing anything for them.
Right.
And you can't hire a Ron Burgess full time for your company because you can't afford him. However, if you can take a couple hours a month of his time and listen to what he has to say and give him access to your systems and your processes, you're going to learn a lot. And to me, that's a good investment. And to me, that's what this is all about.
Right, right. No, I would have to agree that for each of us, and Ed, with your experience both as a CPA, which means you're certified and qualified, but also managing an organization with 600 employees, there really isn't much that hasn't happened that hasn't affected you and left some learning element that you can pass on. And likewise, for me, working with Frontline, each of us are trying to help these companies look at the business from those 3 footstool legs, so to speak, so they don't fall over. You got to have growth, you got to know what the numbers are, and you have to have people who are willing and able to execute.
That's correct.
Well, I appreciate your comments there very much, and it's coming to sort of the end of my career. It's nice to hear that. For those who hope that they can hire me, the best that what I'm going to be able to do is direct them to microgiants.biz. The things that I've picked up over the last 32 years in my own practice, and another 7 years in a national consulting firm prior to that, and many years in business prior to that, really are the things that we're trying to expose these young people to and new businesses to through Microgiants. And this is part, what we're doing here, is part of that effort, is to give people an opportunity to find answers online. They're so darn busy, sweeping floors and getting the restaurant, figuring out where their extra tables are going to go and doing all of that kind of stuff. I mean, they can probably barely keep their head up at night, but hopefully they'll have an opportunity to peruse the internet, and maybe they'll run into us, and maybe they'll pick up a few things. So I would just suggest that as far as marketing is concerned, that Microgiants would be the place. We're starting a brand new program that is going to include a lot of marketing seminars. We're doing those in the Microgiants mentoring meetings, and those are all being recorded and maintained, and they're on our channel, the Microgiants channel on YouTube. So
cool. Well, thank you.
Exciting.
And Ed, for you, where can they reach you?
Well, I got my phone number and my website, dreambigexit.com. Please give me a jingle. I'd love to chat with you, and I won't send you a bill, I promise.
Right. And so I think the same thing. All we're doing is helping everybody realize there are resources out there. You can look at things differently. The hard part, as we all know, when you're small and you're trying to survive, it's very difficult sometimes to find any even breathing space to consider some of the things we're doing here. But the good news is that just in this short hour-long conversation, there were at least several golden nuggets for each of our small business to be able to pull out of this and help innovate and do something differently without spending a lot of time or money. So with that, I want to say thank you to you, Ron and Ed, and let's look forward to doing this again next week.
thank you.
Again, this is Ray Anderson saying good night and goodbye.